I'm Giselle McKinney-Hawkins. I am the Social Action Chair for Lake Charles Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. We have partnered with Mount Calvary's Social Justice Commission and the NAACP to give the citizens of the area information about candidates that are running in this coming election. So we wanted to thank you guys in the audience for coming. We also have questions that were submitted by some people from the community as well as members of this organization. As we discussed before, Delta Sigma Theta is an organization that was founded in 1913. We started with the Women's Suffragette March. The Women's Suffrage March, and we have been socially active and politically active since then. We are a nonpartisan organization, but we do present all the issues for each side. So far this year, for this summer, we've been conducted 6 door-to-door voter registration drives ranging from Vinton to DeQuincy, Sulphur, Westlake, North Lake Charles, the Terraces, and we also did voter registration at McNeese State University with Pi Zeta, which is our undergraduate convention as well. So we also have gone to LaGrange High School and registered voters there. Our Social Action Subcommittee Chair is Alice Donklar. She has been the spearhead for our voter registration drive. We've also conducted phone banking as well. She has been involved with that. Our high school initiative has been conducted by Chantel Willis. She has been spearheading that as well. So we've been very active in the community, getting people to know what's going on and to make sure that they are aware of the issues that are in our community. We also have upcoming events. We have one at Sunlight Manor. We're going to be registering voters there on Friday at 4 o'clock. And then this Saturday, we'll be at the Oak Park area and we'll be registering voters there. So we've been very busy in the community, making sure everyone knows what's at stake here and sure that they can have their voice expressed. Delta Sigma Theta, I stated, is a non-partisan organization. I have to state that this is a disclaimer. The sorority is a 501c7 nonprofit organization. All candidates running for office or entering office were invited to participate. The sorority is nonpartisan and does not endorse any candidate. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our MC, our sorority sister, Ms. Nakia Collins Bushnell. She will take over from here and introduce the rules for this engagement. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this lovely day in Southwest Louisiana. Today we are meeting with Mrs. Mandy Thomas as well as Mr. Mitch Bowers, who will be running for the 15th District of the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Beautiful. So I'll go ahead and give the rules of engagement for the evening. I will be your moderator. My name is Nakia Collins Bushnell. I will also read the disclaimer prior to giving out the information as to how you all will rebuttal, how you all will introduce, and how you all will respond to community fielded and participation from the audience questions. Our disclaimer states that Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is a 501c7 nonprofit organization. All candidates running for the offices that will be cited tonight were invited to participate. The sorority is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates. Does everyone here agree and understand that this is for educational purposes as well as to engage our community?
Yes, ma'am.
Beautiful, thank you. So again, my name is Nakia Collins Bushnell. I have 2 timekeepers here next to me. I'll allow them a moment to introduce themselves.
I am Daisy Holmes. I am also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority.
I am Melanie Jackson, and I'm also a member of Delta Sigma Theta.
As we move forward throughout the evening, you'll start with a 2-minute introduction. Our timekeepers will let you know once you've reached the 1-minute mark and the 30-second mark to end that introduction. As we move into the second portion after your introductions, from there we'll go into the community fielded questions as well as the selected questions that I have for the police jury position. You'll have 1 minute to respond to that question. Because there are 2 of you, we've decided tonight that we'll allow for 2 rebuttals at 30 seconds without disruption to one or the other. We would ask that each of you respond completely, allow the other one to complete their sentences and their thoughts respectfully, fairly, and equitably serve the community with your responses. And there will be hard stops, so if you would, please also respect the timekeepers as well as the time of the audience and the people who have decided to attend tonight. Do we all understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Beautiful. Are we ready to go, audience? Yes. Great, we'll get started. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and start to my left with a 2-minute introduction with Miss Mandy Thomas.
Hello. First off, thank y'all for hosting this. I think it's an important thing, and I'm excited to be here. I'm a little nervous. This is my first actual forum, so just kind of give you a little background on myself. I'm married to Jonathan Thomas, and we have a 13-year-old son. I am currently employed at Bank F&BD. I work in the Sulphur branch. I have been employed in the banking industry for about 20 years now. I specialize in both commercial and consumer lending. I am a Republican, and I'm committed to conservative Christian values. I feel like what drove me to run for police jury is I feel like, similar to when I ran for council, the decisions made by our police jury directly impact our way of life, our quality of life, and the future of our community. And so for me, it's important that District 15 has a voice in those decisions as they're made. I have had the honor of serving on the Sulphur City Council for over 6 years now. I had not planned on running for a third term. I'm serving my second term currently, and this would give me the opportunity to continue my service to the community, just on a broader scale, and hopefully being able to make a larger impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can recuse the remainder of your time.
Oh, I'll recuse. I'm sorry.
That's okay, no worries.
Time limits are going to take me a minute.
That's all right. We'll go ahead and move forward with Mr. Mitch Thomas, or Bowers, excuse me.
That's okay. That's
Oh,
all right.
giving you a person.
Yeah, you combining us. I see how you're doing. Well, thanks again for having us. My name is Mitch Bowers. Obviously, I'm running for Police Jury District 15. I'm running because I believe it's time for a fresh perspective. I believe it's time for a business-minded mindset on the police jury. I'm also a proud Republican. I'm also a conservative Christian with strong Christian values. I'm a lifelong Sulphur resident, and I'm a small business owner. So I believe with the combination of all those things, I understand what values matter most to our families, to our businesses, to our ways of life, things like that. For 8 years, I served on the Sulphur Parks and Recreation Board of Directors. We worked with millions and millions of dollars with new projects going on every year. A lot of times people think, Sulphur Parks and Recreation, or just the Parks and Recreation system in general, they think of maybe just baseball fields or soccer fields, but Sulphur Parks and Recreation is a $70 million entity. There is a water park, there is an exercise center, there's Olympic pools, we have multiple outdoor parks, we have a dog park. It's a huge entity with $17 to $18 million budget every year. So it's no small thing by any means. Being on the Sulphur Parks and Recreation Board, I learned firsthand what good governance can do, and how listening to people and incorporating the ideas of the community really go a long way as to making a difference in your community. I'm ready to bring that same passion, that same commitment to the police jury if elected. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. We'll go ahead and start with our first set of questions. You'll have 1 minute to respond to the questions. You will each receive the same question. If you need me to repeat it, I will repeat. If I'm not clear, or if you don't have a clear understanding of the question, we can digest it from there, okay? So we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Mitch Bowers, and we'll talk a little bit about community engagement and community priorities. What do you see as the top 3 priorities for our community, and how do you plan to address them?
All right, I will kind of break this down in a little bit. There's quite a few priorities I have, so we'll start with outside of the city of Sulphur. Okay, so the priorities that the parish maintains outside of the city. always seem to be drainage. There always seems to be issues with drainage outside of the city limits, sometimes inside of the city limits as well, but that's not obviously parish territory. That would be more city territory. So I think we have to work closely with gravity drainage. We have to make sure our boards are appointed appropriately to get these drainage issues fixed. Inside the city of Sulphur, it's going to be economic development. You know, it's trying to get new businesses, new entrepreneurs, new investors into the city to give our individuals, especially our kids, something to do in the city. There's not a whole lot of options other than, like I stated earlier, Sulphur Parks and Recreation for children to go, for children to do.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. And we'll move to Miss Mandy with the same question. Would you like me to repeat?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
So for me, my top three would be emergency preparedness. We currently see what's happening with the hurricane, with Florida, in Louisiana, that's in Southwest Louisiana. It's just kind of a part of our lifestyle. We have to be ready. I served on the council during COVID and Hurricane Laura. So for me, emergency preparedness is very important, and also with us being surrounded by industry. You know, we need to be ready if we have some kind of leak or something like that. Responsible development is a term I use a lot. I feel that when we're doing planning, zoning, zoning changes, things of that nature, while development's very important, we have to look at how does it impact current neighborhoods and current communities. And my other would also be drainage. Drainage always going to be an issue in Southwest Louisiana, and it's just a matter of continuing to get those ditches cleaned out. For me, that's the biggest thing. We need to work on the public works, getting out there cleaning them.
Both of you spoke of economic development, emergency preparedness, and drainage. How do those things funnel into one another? And how does that actually tie into economic development, as well as what the current, as you mentioned, communities are experiencing here in Southwest Louisiana, Ms. Mandy?
I would say, well, obviously economic development, and I'm kind of trying to figure out how to answer that. Economic development is obviously important when we talk about, obviously, emergency preparedness, because you want people who are coming to the area to feel like we're ready for whatever comes our way. Repeat the question. I feel like I misunderstood something you said. I'm so sorry, y'all.
Each of you discussed economic development as well as drainage and emergency preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
How do those three things tie into economic development and what the current communities, as you stated, experience here in Southwest Louisiana?
Okay, I'm sorry.
No worries.
So if you're wanting to bring people to our community for economic development, to build things, new businesses, you have to have good drainage. You have to have a plan for if there's an emergency. So that's how I feel all that plays in together.
Thank you. Mr. Bowers?
So I think the funnel starts and stops with these 15 members up here and the staff that works for the police jury, right? So these are the decision makers. All these chairs that you'll see, every other Thursday night, they're the decision makers. So it takes proper planning. You have to be able to not only plan in the now, but you got to foresee the future. So if we're talking about let's say a Sasol expansion that's going to bring 600 or 800 new people that are going to need homes, there may be a construction boom. Well, the more concrete, the more construction you have, you're going to have water runoff. So Houston's having a big problem, and it's had a big problem for years with drainage and with flooding, and it's because of that. They didn't plan ahead. So I guess the simple answer to that is good planning. It's able to foresee what's coming down the road, through your economic development, like your SWOT layouts and things like that, to see what's expected of this community, how to plan for additional economic development, and make sure we don't have those drainage issues, those flooding issues, but also are still staying ahead of the game, whether it's infrastructure or housing.
Any rebuttal, Ms. Mandy?
I agree with him. It's all about planning. And if you're not planning, and a lot of the issues that we have today are due to poor planning. People did not plan for what we have going on in our community now.
Any rebuttal?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. So as you all talk through economic development, we'll pause there for just a moment. to determine a little bit more about what economic development means to you and what your perception the community has and what that means to the community. So we'll start with Mr. Bowers.
So economic development, what it means to me is it's multifaceted, okay? So usually with economic development, there's something that's bringing more individuals here. Sometimes that's industry, sometimes that's, you know, activities or things to do. My idea or my vision of what Lake Charles, what Sulphur could be is developing property and land that's already available, that people are trying to develop, that your investors are trying to develop, and cutting the red tape and making it easier for those individuals to invest their hard-earned money into our area, whether it's the I-10 lakefront, whether it's frontage roads in Sulphur, whether it's the other side of the parish, you know, just in between Lake Charles and Highway. Cutting the red tape, making it easier on the parish level, but also the city levels, so that investors will want to come here. Once you get more things, people are going to move in. They're going to see, hey, that's a nice area, that's up and coming. We want to move there.
For me, I would say I would mention industry. I think industry is a huge driving force for our community, and I think it always will be. And with that, you know, that's going to bring people here. Unfortunately, a lot of the development that we see is industrial driven, so it might not be the most appealing. There probably is not a lot of things for people to do inside this, you know, inside the community on the west side for our children and things like that, other than like parks and recreation. I know that we are currently working on an overlay district. We already have an overlay district. Is it okay? We already have an overlay district on some of those interstate properties, right when you're coming into Sulphur, headed into the the West Lake Sulphur Lake Charles area on I-10. We are working on changing that up to where it's more entertainment focused, so that it's geared towards development of that nature. So it's like you couldn't just put, you know, a mini storage there. It would be more restaurants, entertainment focused. So we're hoping that that's gonna, once that's completed, it will, you know, get people to come want to build right there.
Where does the community fit in that as far as public engagement? How will you ensure that community members have a voice in local government decisions? Ms. Mandy?
I think it's just a matter of being available and being connected, and that's something I feel that I do a pretty good job of. When we have things like that going on, I'm constantly reaching out to people. I'm available so that, you know, they can, I mean, I'll have an office job, so people just stop in and talk to me. I think it's important for us to, social media is a really good tool that a lot of people use nowadays. So I think it's important that when we're making decisions like that, you know, hey, this is something we're looking at doing. We'd like your input. For big projects, I think you could have some town halls and things of that nature. I think that, you know, any kind of community engagement like that's good. But I think the biggest thing is just to be out and about talking to people. Because even when you hold town halls and things like that, they're not necessarily going to show up. So I think it's just a matter of your leadership being out and about and talking to people about those projects.
Mr. Bowers?
Can you repeat the question one more time for me?
Absolutely. How will you ensure that community members have a voice in local government decisions?
I believe public engagement is important. I believe communication in any relationship is important, whether it's with your spouse or whether it's with your children or whether it's with your coworkers. But I believe it's even more important in government. With lack of communication, leads people to develop their own ideas or their own view of what you're doing or what was said. I think if you have clear communication, whether that's through town halls, whether that's through social media, whether that's through being active, the more clear and the more transparent you are, the more you get community involvement. If the community thinks the government at any level is against them, or they don't think that they have a voice, they give up. And that's the opposite of what you want, or at least what I want in these positions. I want more community engagement. I want more people. And I believe listening to the people that are speaking is the most important thing.
Any rebuttal, Ms. Mandy? Okay. As it relates to public safety, Mr. Bowers, what strategies will you implement to enhance public safety in our neighborhood?
Is there any certain area you're thinking of in particular, or just general public safety?
Overall, from your interpretation of the question.
Overall public safety, I think our law enforcement does a fantastic job. I think they're overworked and underpaid in general, whether it's at the city or the sheriff level. But I think working closely with all areas of law enforcement, the local cities, the sheriff, the marshals, is a way to is the way to make people feel safe. Again, back to communication. Having that open communication with the law enforcement agencies, and knowing where the issues are, the troubled areas are, and what better way that we can help them, whether it's through funding or whether it's through grants, just listening to them and identifying issues that they're seeing firsthand on the battleground or on the front lines would be the best way to kind of help with that and handle that.
Mandy?
I think that it's important that we are just having discussions with them, that there's an open line of communication, networking. Other than, as far as like law enforcement, they don't really fall under the police jury per se, but, you know, kind of like I do now, even though, you know, there's not a whole lot you can do necessarily to, you can't call them and ask them, hey, I need you to go, you know, look at this area for me. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm saying that back. You can call and ask them to. You can't force them to. So I just think communication is very important. We also have fire districts, so that's involved in public safety too. I think ensuring that even though they're not under our umbrella, the law enforcement side for funding, you can help them with funding to just ensure they have the equipment they need and everything that they need to do their job. And I just think that the communication with what's happening in your district as far as concerns. Okay.
Could you tell me a time when you volunteered or partnered with a public safety entity, Miss Mandy?
I volunteer a lot. I'm just trying to think of which ones would actually technically be public safety. I mean, anytime they have something as far as like handing out things to the community, I'm there. I know after the hurricane, there was a lot of situations that came up where I just tried to make sure I was present. You know, like I said, there was a lot of times where they were handing out things to the community. Is that kind of what you're I think I'm not understanding exactly when you say public safety.
I think it's your interpretation of the question. So I can repeat the question again so that Mr. Bowers can respond. Could you tell me a time when you volunteered or partnered with a public safety entity?
You asking me? Yes, ma'am. I do it every Friday night. I'm a physical therapist. I work the sidelines and volunteer my time on the local high school fields as part of the medical staff. So I work very closely with the Acadian Ambulance and the EMTs there on the sidelines, making sure that the communication is open, that we know how to contact them. So every school in Calcasieu Parish has to have an EMT and an ambulance at every game. So we have meetings prior to every game with all the medical staff, with the referees, with the law enforcement that are there, just to plan in case something does go wrong. Sometimes they do, and then you need to get those ambulances on the field or those EMTs on the field pretty quickly. So I do it every Friday night.
Any rebuttal, Ms. Mandy?
Ma'am.
As we're talking about our public safety, public health initiatives are also a concern. Both of you mentioned industry and attracting economic development through industry. What concerns have community members expressed to you about the community, and how would you acknowledge and address those concerns?
Well, as far as in reference to industry, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I would say that there's we're surrounded by industry. I live in Maplewood, so it's literally at my back door. So there's always concerns. Kind of earlier when I mentioned emergency preparedness, what we saw that happened with, I think it was BioLab, where they had the chemical leak. That is a huge concern because are we prepared? You know, do we have the right communication? We think we have the right communication, but I know there were people who lived in that area who did not get notifications of what was going on. So I know that that's a huge concern for people in our community. That would be something that has been brought to my attention. You know, there's always concern about whether or not it's toxic. Is it not healthy? That would be another concern that people bring to my attention. I know that there are many standards that they have to, I'm sorry.
Mr. Bowers.
So I think we go back to communication again here. I believe it's important to have an emergency response team ready to go in case these incidents happen. And I think it's necessary to also have trial runs of those to make sure that everything is working properly and that your emergency response teams are ready to go. I don't think they're running them on TV anymore, but the Lake Area Industry Alliance was running the commercials on TV that were saying what you see whenever, you know, there may be white smoke or steam or whatever, and we may think it's toxic or people may think it's toxic. They did a really good job of doing commercials and educating the public on what they were seeing. I think more of that is always good. Obviously, we won't regulate what comes out. That'll be through the EPA and things like that. You know, enforcement agencies well above the parish's head. But I think just good education and maybe running some public service announcements, letting people know would be the best way.
Any rebuttal?
Oh, no ma'am.
How will you work to improve access to healthcare services for residents in your district? Mr. Bowers.
To improve, say that again, access to it?
Access to healthcare services for residents in your district.
So I think the answer there would be, so under our appointment, we have appointments to the West Cal Hospital Board. You know, so I think working with them, talking with the CEO of the hospital, seeing areas that they're seeing that they're struggling in, whether it be the emergency room or whether it be vaccinations, you know, whether it be for the flu or COVID or whatever the issue may be at that time. See if we can work together with those and see if we can do a community outreach and just get some information out to the public one way or the other.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
Well, on my end, I think that transportation is a big issue. I know that currently we have, the parish does offer some transportation options for people. And one of the issues that I have gotten complaints on and concerns about is there's not enough transportation to get them to the hospitals. So I think transportation's an area maybe we need to look at moving some more funding so that we can offer more buses that come and go, that, you know, those little buses that bring them. I think we need to look at some more funding to that so that there's more options, because just getting them there is the critical issue in my opinion. West Calcam Hospital has done a fabulous job at bringing more services to the West Calcasieu area. And I'll also mention SC3, Sulphur Christian Community Coalition. They have done a tremendous job with working with, I know, like the health unit and resources like that to actually give them a facility to come offer services to low income.
Any rebuttal?
Oh, man.
How will you work to improve affordable housing in our area and to also address the crises? Ms. Thomas.
I do believe that we should be able to offer some kind of incentives to bring developers into the area for issues like low-income housing, and not even necessarily low income. I mean, with our economy right now, I mean, it's difficult for anybody. I mean, I work in the banking industry, and sadly, I mean, a lot of people can't afford homes because of the interest rates. And that's also causing an issue with the investors to even be able to offer affordable rental income. I mean, affordable rental rates to the people who are trying to rent. I do believe that we need more low-income housing, and I would like to see us be able to offer incentives to developers to bring more in this, because especially West Calcasieu, we don't have a lot.
Mr. Bowers.
Yeah, so it's the incentive program. It's incentives to investors. If they don't have a reason to come to your area, they're not coming to your area. You know, these things cost millions of dollars to build, and I think it's something that we need. I think it's something that, especially on our side of the river, we don't have a lot of apartment complexes and things like that that people can really take pride in and say. And then with the cost of housing going up, with interest rates the way they are, not everybody can afford, especially first-time homeowners. Not everybody can afford a house. You know, give them options with lights and with sidewalks and with little play areas for kids to play and things like that. But it's got to be incentives for the investors, but they can't be permanent incentives. They have to be temporary incentives. You know, here's your incentive. Maybe it's a tax deduction for a year or 2 years or whatever it is to get them here, and then those tax incentives go away in time. You know.
How would you define an incentive to the average person who does not work in banking, who does not work in economic development, or hold a political office, to understand the ABCs of incentives?
So I guess the incentives that I'm talking about will be, as businesses, as property owners, you pay taxes. You pay your taxes. You pay your millages. So looking at the numbers and finding a common sense way that works not only for the investors, but also works for the city, also works for the parish as well. So where that everybody is working together, everybody's happy, the parish is getting income one way or the other, the city is getting income one way or the other, and the investors are saving a little bit of money in the short term with the incentive of bringing more people here. The more people you get, the more people spend money. The more people spend money, the more you can tax them. So then that becomes it becomes very influential for the city of Sulphur, and then for the parish as well. You know, so more people in your area, more people spending money especially, is always a good thing when it comes to funding, because everything that we're talking about costs money, whether you're preparing for the city or preparing for the parish to develop your area, it costs money.
Well, I agree with what he said, and that's a good explanation. Another thing that I don't think he mentioned when we talk about incentives that can be put into play is, when you're actually not necessarily just in the tax side, but the actual infrastructure side, the city could potentially help with some of those costs so that you're not paying as much money to lay your infrastructure, like your sewage. That's another option for an incentive.
We're just going to piggyback on that, saying there's also grants and funding out there that that the parish is aware of, that the cities are aware of, that they can apply to help these investors as well. But you got to have somebody.
You brought up that point.
You got to have somebody looking for them, and that's the thing. You have to have somebody on your team actively searching out for those grants. Whether they be federal or on the state level.
Sure. So I love that point of grants and funding was brought up. Can you tell me a time where you've worked with the community members to serve them through grant access, grant education, or forums that bring more funding into specific communities?
Yes, ma'am. When I was on the Sulphur Parks and Recreation Board, we had a dedicated team and staff that was always searching and always looking. And several things that we were able to build, that we were able to bring to the community, were solely done with grants. I think one of the ones that we were able to do was almost 100%, if not close to it, was a dog park. There was a big talk in Sulphur of some people wanting a dog park, and we're reaching out to the board of directors wanting that, and then a couple board members didn't want it. But we said, look, if we can get the grants for this, if it's a minimal or no cost to taxpayers, and we already had the property, let's do it. And it turned out to be one of the most commonly used areas of Sulphur Parks and Recreation. You can drive by any nice weather day and see people playing with their dogs in the dog park. So I would say that's one of the ones firsthand, but we did it all the time at Sulphur Parks and Recreation.
Thomas?
On the city side, if there's grant opportunities available, we do try to make people aware, especially when they come to meet with the city in reference to any kind of project they're doing. I know, we've done projects with Keep Louisiana Beautiful. They offer grant incentives, and so we've reached out to them for that. Louisiana Recovery is another one that we have referred a lot of people in the community to. And through FEMA, they have the PPPDR, personal property debris removal. That was a huge one. And after the hurricane, a lot of people did not have the funds available to clear their property off or to get repairs. And so Louisiana Recovery, PPDR through FEMA were to a lot of people got help through those programs.
No, ma'am.
As it relates to some of the national issues that trickle down into the state and local issues, what is your position on gun control measures, and how do you balance Second Amendment rights with community safety?
Well, I'm very pro Second Amendment. I do feel as though we already have a lot of measures in place that should protect our community. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to prevent, as cliche as this sounds, you're not going to be able to prevent bad guys from getting guns. And that is where the issue lies, in my opinion. It's not something that can necessarily be controlled, unfortunately, because if it could, we would have already stopped it. But I don't feel like there's any need to put any more restrictions on guns, because like I said, you already have to get a background check and things of that nature.
Mr. Bowers?
Yes, ma'am. I'm pro Second Amendment. I'm pro gun. I own several guns of all different kinds. I think this boils down to enforcing the laws that are already on the books. You have several laws that are already on the books, and then they just don't get enforced. I'm a believer that guns don't kill people, people kill people. If somebody wants to kill someone, whether they have a gun, they'll use a knife, they'll use some other form of way for destruction, and to take a life. I don't think adding new laws until we enforce what you already have on the books. So I would not approve any new laws to restrict gun owners, especially in this area, in any way, shape, or form.
So we will welcome questions from the community, but if you would submit that through. Thank you. I'll give you your time back for 30 seconds.
And I think that working with law enforcement is the way to do it. If we're talking about, violence in schools, then they're trying to take away the sheriffs and the police officers in schools on the national level, keep them there. I also believe in, I love the law that we just passed here, where you don't have to be licensed to conceal carry. I think the more people, responsible gun owners that have a firearm with them, are going to stop the crazies with the firearms.
Thank you. Any rebuttal? Okay. So going back to the community question, I do appreciate your passion, and I will address that in the second part of my question. No worries. Thank you. It's passion. Gun violence is rampant in our country, and children are being murdered in schools. What are our plans to address these issues? Mr. Bowers.
Yes, ma'am. I don't think we have a gun violence issue in our schools in this parish. So the things that I vote on up here are not going to have an effect on the national level. That's a problem on the national level, I think, more so than the local area or local level. But back to what I was saying earlier, making sure you have law enforcement in these schools, and I think that's would be more between the sheriff and the Calcasieu Parish School Board versus the police jury. But I think that's where it starts. That to give criminals or kids that are looking to do violence, don't give them an incentive to go by taking away guns or taking away armed individuals. Deter them by putting a sheriff at everyone that's also armed, and that can stop it before something major happens.
Ms. Mandy.
I think that we're already doing a good job in this area as far as all of our schools have officers on staff. that are there to help with that issue. For me, and I don't mean to defer the issue, but I think it's more of a mental health issue. For me, that's where I feel like we have to focus. I mean, mental health is an issue that, we talk about homelessness. I think it's 1 in 3 homeless, unsheltered person has a mental health problem. So I feel like we need to we need more counselors on staff. And some of the recent issues that we've seen come up with gun violence in the schools, there were so many warning signs that was 100%, in my opinion, preventable. And so to me, it's not so much the focus on taking the guns away. It's focusing on the mental health of our children, the counselors, ensuring the teachers have the support they need. That's the issue for me.
Any rebuttal?
Ma'am.
This will be our final question before we move into a 2-minute conclusion and wrap up. What motivated you, Miss Mandy, to run for your seat? And what do you hope to achieve if elected?
Well, and I know I kind of mentioned it earlier, so I'm sorry for repeating myself again, but it's quality of life. I mean, when the people that sit in these seats up here, they make the most difference in your life, in my opinion, as far as decisions. I feel like we're so focused on what's happening at the federal and state level that all too often people fail to realize that these are the people who enact change in our day-to-day lives. And so for me, that's what it's about. It's having a voice for our community. I have a son. We live here. I want the best for us, and I want the best for those around me. And so for me, that's what has motivated me to run. As far as, and it kind of goes back into what I mentioned earlier, for me, I feel like the most important job we have is to advocate for those we represent. We can talk about all these different goals we have, but at the end of the day, that is our job, is to advocate. And so, okay.
I've always been active in my community, wherever that's been, whether it was in high school, on the student council and in Beta Club, or whether it was in college, on campus life and activity, or running for various offices for that. I enjoyed my time and was very passionate of my time on the Sulphur Parks and Recreation Board. I loved talking to the constituents, hearing their opinions, hearing their input, and really seeing something start with a vision or an idea and then come to fruition. I'm no longer on that board, so this was the next step for me, and wanted to do it on a bigger level, at the parish level, but still bring that same passion and that same commitment that I've always had with helping my community and bettering my community, to try to leave this place a little bit better than when I found it 40 years ago. Thank you.
No, ma'am.
For the sake of our community and the passion that we've all expressed today, I'll take 2 questions from the audience that have been written in script for review. I'll review the question and I'll present the question if appropriate. You won't be able to verbally? You'll have to write. going to be one question, and I'll field her. So this is more of a community economic development engagement question. I'm going to reframe your question, but we're going to get there. Okay. So several years ago, cost of living was in a certain space where you could afford to rent, you could afford to lease, you could also afford to purchase based on the market and the economy, as well as what your profession was. As we move forward and we're looking for improvements in our communities, as we're looking at zoning and the housing, how do we look through special populations to determine what meets their needs economically, socially, as well as their habitations and residence? So in short, how do we create affordable housing in this current market for those who fall between the cracks, not necessarily middle class, upper or lower, but they fall between the cracks with limited resources?
I think that's the importance of just your community in general, whether it's like we were talking earlier with grants and funding on a parish level or a city level, but it's also working with the churches. It's working with the community, the churches in the community that know what the problems are. I think that needs to be pushed just as much as government help. These people are falling through the cracks and are looking for somewhere to turn. I think having an open engagement with churches and with various community groups. In Sulphur, there's multiple. There's Care Help, there's SC3, as Ms. Thomas mentioned earlier, that are great at helping these people get on their feet. Great at helping these people that are falling through the cracks find housing, find food, find jobs. So in Sulphur, that's how it's done, and I think they can, other areas in the parish can use them as an example.
Well, I would say, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier in reference to incentives, you have to look, like you mentioned, it's not just about the low income, it's about the ones who are falling through the cracks. So I do think maybe there needs to be some planning committees, maybe some special committees even formed to kind of look at what does that bracket look like, what does that income level look like that we feel like is falling through the cracks, and then look at a way to incentivize someone to potentially do a housing development or something of that nature, to where it would not necessarily low income, but to where it falls into that category where they could afford it. Also, like he said, SC3, Care Help, they have just such an amazing outreach program, and people come to them whenever they can't afford, to pay their rent, pay their mortgage, whatever the case is, and they help, and I think there's programs through the state and things of that nature, and they all come to those organizations and meet with people.
And so we'll go ahead and move into our 2-minute closing. Mrs. Thomas, we'll go ahead and start with you to do a 2-minute close, and then we'll move to you, Mr. Bowers.
I guess I would kind of like to go back to earlier when I mentioned that I feel like our most important job as police jurors is to advocate for those we represent. And like I said, we can talk about projects and things of that nature, but you have to have someone who's willing to be available, someone who's willing to make those phone calls. You know, if it's something as simple as my ditch isn't draining. And I feel like I do a pretty good job of that now on the city council. I'm always there for my people. They can always reach me, even if I can't answer the phone, I call them back. So for me, that's what it's about. It's about the community. It's about staying connected with people. And, you know, I just wish people would give me the opportunity to continue the service I'm providing now on the police jury level.
Bowers.
As a small business owner, I know what it takes to balance budgets, to make tough decisions, to navigate through challenging times. I believe that government should operate with those same principles, I guess, that make our businesses successful. And that's with accountability, that's with efficiency, and that's with a focus on results. I will work hard to improve the areas that we lack in. I feel like we can do better on this police jury, and I'm working to bring that infrastructure to make sure our roads are maintained, to make sure that new economic development comes to this area, but also to make sure that our community is safe and it is thriving. I'm not a career politician. I don't plan on being a career politician. I'm just someone who loves my community very much and is taking this route to try to make it as best as I possibly can, and I possibly know how. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for your commitment to the community, for taking the time to address our participants, as well as to respond to the community questions that were asked tonight. We appreciate your time, your service, the time away from your families, and we look forward to seeing how each of you turn out with your positions and with the seats that you're running for. Thank you so much. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back with our next group.
Thank you, Nakia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
part of our forum for this evening. We are 5
Yeah. It's not through the mic.
Okay. I don't know what happened.
You.
One second.
There it is.
It's back on. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. This is the second part of our forum this evening. This part, we have our 3rd Congressional District candidates. As we stated before, this is a nonpartisan organization, and all candidates were invited. These 2 candidates, Sadie Summerlin and Priscilla Gonzalez, have accepted. Our other 2 candidates did not, Xan John and Clay Higgins. So we'll proceed with this under the same format, and we will introduce the format again with our moderator, Nakia Collins Bushnell. We will also take questions from the audience. I'll pass out those cards in advance. So please be polite when you ask your question and be concise with your question that you request. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Nakia Collins Bushnell. I'll be your moderator for this portion of our discussion. I'll start with our disclaimer. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is a 501c7 nonprofit organization. All candidates running for your office were invited to participate. The sorority is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates. So as we move forward tonight through our educational purposes, we are meeting with Mrs. Sadie Summerlin, as well as Mrs. Priscilla Gonzalez. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Great. So we'll field questions from the audience, as well as we have some that have been fielded prior to. You'll have a 2-minute opening. When questions are asked, you'll have a 1-minute response and a 30-second rebuttal times 2, and a 2-minute closing. We'll have our timekeepers, which I'll have introduce themselves briefly.
I am Daisy Holmes. I am part of sorority, Delta Sigma Theta sorority.
I am Melanie Jackson, and I'm also a part of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated.
We would also ask that each of you allow one another to finish your thoughts, respond to the questions appropriately, respectfully, and equitably to our community.
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. So we'll go ahead and start with Ms. Priscilla Gonzalez with your 2-minute introduction.
Yes, good evening, Lake Charles. Thank you for being here. My name is Priscilla Gonzalez. I was born and raised in South Texas. I moved to Louisiana in 2020, where I filed to run for office, and I believe about a year ago for mayor president. I was disqualified, but when I first moved here, I heard of a horrible human being called Clay Higgins, who called for the unaliving or for the killing of all Muslims, spewed a lot of rhetoric towards the community, and I felt a calling to come out and ask the Democrats who is running against him. Since nobody was running against him and I was new to Lafayette, I could not run against him, and I saw the opportunity now to run against him now that I've been established for about 4 to 5 years here in Lafayette. And I am a full life servant. I have worked on legislation like the PACT Act, which is the piece of legislation that helped our veterans who are exposed to toxic military burn pits. I do have a bachelor's in political science. I was a pre-law student. I did run for mayor in Corpus Christi, Texas, where I focused on registering 4,000 to 6,000 people who could not read or write and get them to the polls. I'm also actively working on legislation for the state of Texas, and I plan on doing the same here in Louisiana. I do plan on working on legislation that's going to help our women, our veterans, our children, our homeless community. Also working on legislation that's going to lower the cap on rent and so forth. So my entire life, I was born as a missionary, and I've dedicated my entire life as a public servant to the community. I do work with a helping homeless community with the Corpus Christi Beach Cleanup Club, and I do pro bono legal services towards people who cannot afford lawyers pro bono. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. We'll now move to Ms. Sadie Summerlin.
Good evening. Thank you so much for hosting this. Educating our voting population is incredibly important. My name is Sadie Summerlin. I have a background in education. I have a master's in elementary education, a bachelor's in early childhood education, and an associate's degree in interdisciplinary studies. I have 10 years experience in the public education classroom, both in the general education and special education setting. I have taught from pre-K all the way up into high school and have done some work with adults and college students. For the past 2 years, I have been a women's rights and reproductive rights activist. I have spent my time at the Capitol in committees, showing up to not only speak out about what's going on, but ensure that we are represented there. Thank you. I never thought that I would be running for office, but with the constant barrage of attacks on our human rights, I felt I was called to do this, not only to fight back, but to empower every one of us as Louisiana citizens to stand up and stand in our power, be involved with our government, and ensure that our voices are heard.
Thank you for your responses. These are candidates for the 3rd Congressional District of Louisiana. Again, Sadie Summerlin and Priscilla Gonzalez. You'll have 1 minute as we go into the questions to respond. I'll start with Ms. Gonzalez. As it relates to education, as we have educators here in the room this evening, what are your priorities for education funding, and how will you address disparities in educational resources?
Okay, yes. So when that comes to a federal level, that's actually education is more on a state and local level. So my plan is to work with state and local mayor presidents and formulate a plan to get more federal funding. When it comes to charter schools and the $6,000 vouchers that the government is giving to wealthy people as well as children of lower income families, they do not have the rest of the money to pay for the tuition, because we do know that charter schools cost about upwards of $14,000. So I do plan on proposing legislation. I do plan, and I've done this before, I've helped pass the PACT Act, so I do plan on working with all mayor presidents in all parishes and formulating a plan to pass legislation and work with the administration and work with all Democrats and Republicans across the board.
An educated populace is the safest way for our nation, is the best way for our nation to stay safe. So investing in our public education means investing not only in the system, in education, but in our teachers and in our schools. What I have never understood about how we punish schools that are failing, and I hate to say that word, that are struggling, and we take more funds from them. Those are the schools that we need to pour our investment into, because it is a call. It is a call to action. These are our students. No matter what school they go to, no matter where they are, no matter how much money their parents have or don't have, every child deserves our investment in their education. Public education is how our nation will continue to move forward.
As we remain in the side of education, Ms. Summerlin, how will you support access to higher education and vocational training for individuals in your congressional district?
I believe that upper education should be a part of our public education system. If a college degree is, for example, to be able to be an educator, you have got to have a college degree. Access to that college degree should not be determined on your income level. I also believe that college is not the only route to success for our students and for their future. it is opening these programs up as early as middle school and high school so that children that know that they're interested in working with animals or carpentry or whatever it may be has a way to connect with that in our community so that they not only have the training and experience bestowed upon them, but they have a future ready and waiting for them to walk into.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez.
Yes, as stated before, I do plan on working on federal legislation as well as state legislation and pushing that forward. That is probably the best way that I think that we can probably secure more funding for our schools. I will focus on obviously our most lower income parishes, and as someone who is running for Congresswoman, I will slash my salary to $40,000 per year, and the rest I will be giving it back to every single parish, and I will let the parish decide on how they want to distribute those fundings. But again, I would work on legislation. I've done it before. I plan on working on legislation right now regarding impeaching Congressman Clay Higgins for his recent disgusting remarks against Haitians. So that would be my plan of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Any rebuttal?
I believe that we need to actually work on making changes in the way that our taxes are structured and how we are investing them in our education system. I don't think that we need any flashy show that is only going to work for a small amount of time. We need to invest in our future and make real changes that will not be a here and now quick fix, but one that we will actually fix the system and bring us forward.
Yes, by proposing legislation that is actually permanent. So that would be not a temporary solution, that would be a solid solution moving forward.
What specific plans do you have, Ms. Summerlin, to promote job growth and economic development in the 3rd District?
Well, I do believe that we need to diversify. We talk a lot about the industry that we have here, and we don't speak about the farming that we have here. I think it's time that we invest in the people that feed our families and feed the nation. Look, one of the things that makes Louisiana so special is the food that we have, and that is a part of what our culture, the special of our culture here in Louisiana. It is investing in our farmers and investing in the cultural of our state here and down here, especially in the Acadiana area. We have a beautiful, vibrant, colorful, rich in history culture that we need to invest in and create more jobs and opportunities for that.
Gonzalez?
I agree 100% with everything with Ms. Summerlin stated. I would also include that I would actually expand the travel and tourist business, and I would probably do that by promoting Lafayette and Louisiana and Baton Rouge and so forth. As Ms. Summerlin stated, we have a beautiful culture. Everybody comes here for the food, more festivals. I would focus on opening more manufacturers to bring in more jobs for our community, and not just bring in more jobs, bring in more jobs that will pay a living wage, not just the federal minimum wage, which is sadly, I do believe it's at $7 per hour.
So particularly in the wake of challenges that were posed by the pandemic, how would that look with your support in the small business industry?
With the small business industry, what happened was the Trump administration failed to handle the PPP loans. So what they did was they sent out all these PPP loans, and all of the lawyers, all of the wealthy businesses contacted their accountants immediately, and all the small business owners weren't able to get enough of that money. So while all of these rich lawyers and all of these, wealthy corporations snagged up all the money, a lot of small businesses weren't able to get any of that money. So what I would do is I would actually work with the administration and ensure that in the state of Louisiana, and I would work with the governor, and I would work with every single congressman to make sure that we vet every single person and focus more on small businesses first instead of just handing out money to millionaires. Thank you.
Ms. Summerlin.
I think it begins with investing in the people rather than corporations. We have allowed corporations to run away without accountability. And I think it begins with ensuring that we remember that our government was formed for the people and by the people. And with that comes small businesses. We did suffer a lot through the pandemic. We did not invest in our people. We got little tidbits, but it was not enough. We deserve more of the investment that we pay into our tax system to benefit us even more than what it does now, because it's very little.
Any rebuttal?
No.
Thank you. So as we talk about farming, what are the plans to improve access to health care services in rural areas?
Are you starting with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So as we do know, OBGYNs have decreased by 19% because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So that is significantly going to impact rural areas. My proposal would be to work with the administration. My proposal would be, again, to work on legislation. And my proposal would be to actually try to expand facilities in rural areas, and that would include working with state and local police departments, hospitals, ambulances, any type of services that would be out there. So I would be screaming from the rooftops, because as we do know right now, 2 women in Texas have already died. 1 woman has died in Georgia, and we are going to see a lot of women because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and because we don't have exceptions for rape and incest in Louisiana, and women are being turned away from emergency rooms, specifically in rural areas. We are going to see women die in Louisiana. So as that happens and that proceeds, I do plan on proposing on working on legislation. Thank you.
Thank you.
In order for us to improve healthcare access in our state, we are going to have to remedy the problem that we have allowed our state to do. Abortion bans are hurting us. Abortion bans are causing healthcare workers from every field across the board to leave our state, because despite what we think, these bans do not only affect those in the reproductive field. This affects oncologists, this affects general practitioners, this affects ER doctors, this affects everything. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is do better. We're going to have to make our laws reflect the reality of the world we live in, and understand that abortion access does not mean that we are forcing any kind of view. It simply means that there is health care access for those that need it.
No.
Ms. Summerlin, what measures will you implement to ensure transparency and accountability in local government spending?
That is a very needed question, especially with what we're dealing with today. I think as much as we want to say that we don't want big government, I think that we need to recognize that our state government needs a check on it as well. Right now, we have some runaway ethics going on within our state government, and I think that it is going to take somebody who is aware of the political manipulation that occurs with our state politics to go to DC and ensure that things that are passed will hold our state accountable for doing right constitutionally for us as well.
Can you please repeat the question?
Absolutely. What measures will you implement to ensure transparency and accountability in local government spending?
Local government spending. That is a very tough question, and I don't think I have a solution for that question.
Any rebuttal, Ms. Summerlin?
No. Thank you.
So as we talk through a little bit more about government spending, we'll move on to the topic of infrastructure, which is a critical and integral topic for the state of Louisiana. What are your plans, Ms. Summerlin, to improve transportation and infrastructure in the 3rd Congressional District?
Again, I do think that there needs to be accountability. So, for example, we got a massive amount of money for infrastructure improvements years ago, and our past governor spent that money making sure that we all knew that we were a tenth of a mile throughout the mile, and that was a complete waste of funds. So, accountability for the dirty deeds that we like to do down here with our state governments. But I also want to see investment in public transportation. Since I've been campaigning, I've been on I-10, and y'all, it is a mess. It is horrifying out there on that congested, torn apart highway. And we have got to invest in our infrastructure that we do have, but we also need to invest in public transport. So our college students have an easier way to come home and visit their parents and be able to go back to college.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Yes, I agree with Ms. Summerlin 100%. We did receive a lot of federal funding from the Biden Infrastructure Act, but however, we're not appropriating those funds correctly. So what I would do is make sure that we have checks and balances, and that would begin with the governor. So that would be an extremely tough battle. But if elected as Congresswoman, I promise to fight diligently and to actually just go out there and scream from the rooftops and ensure that our governor and everybody else is held accountable for every single dollar that comes into our state.
I do think that we need to have legislation with accountability attached to it, because we are not the only state that struggles with the misdeeds of state governments not honoring the spirit of the legislation. We're one of a few down here, and if we're struggling with it, other states are too, and I believe that it is a congressperson's job to ensure that all of us are moving forward together.
Yes, I would also like to add that I would go above Governor Landry and go straight directly to the Biden administration and try to hold Governor Landry accountable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In addition to infrastructure investments, how do you plan, Ms. Summerlin, to enhance disaster preparedness and the response capabilities throughout our regions?
Thank you for this question. This is something that I speak about personally in my personal life. We do need to be prepared for disasters. We live in an area where hurricanes are prone to hit us, and we need to be prepared for that. We need to have places ready for people to be able to evacuate to. We don't all know somebody in another place. A lot of us, this is where everybody we know is. So we need to ensure that no matter who you are or what your income is or your transportation abilities, we need to ensure that we have a plan in place for all of these people to be able to move up to a safer or out of the danger zone into a safer space. That means housing, that means transportation, that means food, that means accountability for pets.
Yes, I would focus on working with every single mayor of every single parish. I would declare a state of emergency and ensure that we get federal and state funding ready for when hurricanes or storms do come here. I would also focus on insurance companies. So insurance companies are raising their rates, and I would work with the insurance commissioner to make sure that we drop those rates.
So, Mrs. Gonzalez, how will you address environmental issues such as pollution and habitat preservation in our area?
That is a tough battle. This is Louisiana, oil and gas. I would most definitely, I'm a supporter of the Green New Deal, but I do know that it is going to be a 10-year process to slowly work up to switching over to eco-friendly environment and to ensuring that our grandchildren have a country to survive and to live on. So I would work with Republicans, I would work with Democrats, and I would slowly just kind of not move drastically, which is what Republicans believe we are doing. I would move at a slow pace and ensure them that we're not going to stop, gas cars. We're not going to move 100% to electric. And I do believe that the Biden administration already has a 10-year plan for that.
Summerlin?
I believe it begins with education. Part of environmentalism should be a part of our education. That's how we make changes for the future. That's how we do better. But we can't stop there, obviously. We need the EPA to be able to have a bite. When these refineries here have these leaks and they don't let us know and they hide it and they pretend like it doesn't happen, we need accountability for that. All of us know somebody that works in those refineries, and we all know that those leaks happen a whole lot more than what we hear about. That's dangerous to our health. That's our air, that's our water, that's our land. This is where our food comes from. This is where the air we breathe. This is the water we fish from. We have got to invest in diversifying our energy sources. I don't think that we need to move to a place where we say no more of this and no more of that, or only this or only that. I think that's why we got in this predicament in the first place. We have to, again,
No, ma'am.
So with environmental issues, given the unique environmental challenges in Louisiana, what is your stance, Ms. Summerlin, on coastal restoration and protection efforts?
I think that we need to make that a top priority for our state. My husband and I just the other night were complaining about the amount of mosquitoes, and I know I can't be the only one that's been slapping myself silly because I'm getting eat up. And I told him, I always wonder why we're not doing more to protect the environment, because I don't know if y'all know this or not, but dragonflies eat the larvae of mosquitoes. So if we had more dragonflies, maybe we'd have less mosquitoes. Anyway, so again, that comes with education of importance of our coastlines and the importance of protecting this, what it brings to us, and why this very special, unique place that we live in deserves our love and our protection and our rebuilding.
Gonzalez?
Yes, I would again work on legislation. I would ensure that we work directly with the Biden administration, work with the Green New Deal, work with Republicans and Democrats. And I also do agree with Ms. Summerlin when she says that we do need to start educating our community, not just our children, our elder community, our senior citizens, and just kind of show everybody what a beautiful state this can be. And for example, we can raise the quality of life by just improving our environment. The quality of life of every single citizen would significantly increase.
I would like to see us fighting for a restructuring of the use of our taxes. We pay a lot of taxes, and so little of it comes back to us. And I know I've answered this in another question, but truly, I do believe that we have a lot of waste of our taxes that don't go to benefit us. So that's something that we really need to pay close attention to. Look, you pay close attention to your wallets. It's time for the government to pay attention to the wallets that we all build.
I'm good, thank you.
So Ms. Gonzalez, what social issues are the most unique to Louisiana, but the least impactful?
The most unique, but the least impactful. You would have to rephrase your question, please.
What social issues are more present,
Okay.
but least impactful?
I would say crime. Crime is more, no, that would be the reverse. I would say that crime is down, but the state focuses on there's so much crime when it's actually going down, if that answers your question. I think I kind of misunderstood your question. And I hope.
So what do we see more in the news, in the social experiences that we click on every day?
Oh, definitely, yes.
But they're the least impactful in Louisiana.
It would be definitely crime, I would say.
I would say that it's the culture wars. being afraid of what books we have in our libraries, screaming about a boogeyman in the classroom that's not there. I would say overall it's the culture war. I think that there's been a real effort made in fear mongering on baseless issues that are not real. And I would have to say that that's probably the biggest issue that we face in Louisiana, that it does have an impact, but not in a positive way.
Ms. Summerlin, how will you ensure that the voices of all constituents are heard, especially in the marginalized communities?
I think that our Congress people, and not just, I think that anybody who is an elected official owes it to the people to go out there and meet them wherever they are. That's a part of what I've been doing on my campaign. I've been running the roads ragged. If you've seen me in my Kia, just wave hi and let's just keep going. But that's a part of it. We should not have to chase after our representatives and those that represent us in any office. I'm rather disappointed that the other candidates are not here tonight. I think that's a part of the problem. I think that when we're invited to come and speak and educate so that people know who we are and what we're running on and what our priorities are, the more engagement that we have. And I think that any
Ms. Gonzalez.
Yes, great question. Actually, I brought a notepad that I wanted to pass around to every single member here, that if you want to write your name, your address, your email address, your phone number, and write one problem that you see in your community, and I will respond to it. I also went to St. Martinville, where I met with the mayor, president, and I actually plan on, if elected as Congresswoman, to set one specific date every single month where every single mayor, president of every single parish is to come, mandatory, and actually address all of the problems that we have in their communities. And that is going to be mandatory. That is going to be the only way to reach everybody. And I do respond personally to phone calls, emails, texts. I'm on every social media platform. I reach thousands of viewers on TikTok, where I host lives, and I invite all of the community, all of Louisiana, to go up there and ask me questions. And if you guys want me to pass that book around, I will pass it around.
I do believe that our elected officials should be hosting more opportunities for people to be able to show up and ask questions. But again, I don't think that we should put the responsibility on the people to find the elected officials. I think it is the responsibility of the elected officials to go out and meet the people where they are.
Yes, well, the only thing I would say to that is I would direct the mayor presidents to reach out to every single constituent however they can, and actually have a website where they can actually submit questions, or where people can actually go in or host more town hall meetings. And I'm very, very committed to that proposition already. Thank you.
What is your position and stance on criminal justice reform, Ms. Gonzalez, and what changes would you advocate for?
Yes, so as we do know, Governor Landry just fast-pedaled 30 pieces of legislation which are meant to mass incarcerate people of color. I would most definitely, I am not for, more importantly, Louisiana has the highest rate of mass incarceration. I would focus on that. I would focus on abolishing all the for-profit prisons that actually have people working for slave labor and get 60 cents to the dollar and work for McDonald's. I would focus on all of those issues, and I would most definitely, again, I'm very passionate about this. I do work pro bono for people who are actually in jail and can't afford a lawyer to get out. So as we do know, Louisiana has the highest mass incarceration rate. So that is a state priority, and that is a state of emergency that we need to most desperately focus on.
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. What is your position and stance on criminal justice reform, and what changes would you advocate for?
So I know that I've said this a lot, but we have to focus on our education. Honestly, this really is true. So I don't know how many people know this, but those high-stake testing that we have in our public education classrooms have more devious purposes rather than just tracking the students and their knowledge. In the 3rd grade, when our students take that high-stakes test, that information is sent to our prison systems, and they make a prediction for how many beds they will need in the next 15 to 20 years. They know where we need to start to turn this around. We need to do the same. So it's time to invest in our kids, in our education system. That's how we prevent people from having to turn to crime to be able to.
Any rebuttal?
No, great answer from Ms. Summerlin.
Thank you. As it relates to governance and ethics, how do you, Ms. Summerlin, view the influence of money and funds in politics, and what reforms would you support?
I spoke about this a little bit earlier in one of my answers. Corporations, big money, big pharma, big oil and gas, all of those things, they have really taken the precedence with our government, our representation, away from the people. I think that we really need to rein in who can donate to campaigns and how much they can. And I'm speaking as someone who is running for a public office trying to get campaign money. But I would much rather build my money up on $5, $10 donations from the people of the community than seeking out big oil and gas or Entergy or somebody else putting money in my pocket so that I work for them instead of working for the people who I'd be there to work for in the first place.
Ms. Gonzalez.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. How do you view the influence of funds and money in politics, and what reforms would you support?
In politics in general or in our race?
In general.
In general. Okay. That's never going to happen. We're never going to get rid of PACs. We're never going to get rid of corporations. But however, I would advocate against abolishing PACs. And that's not a question that I could probably answer, because that's something that it's not a problem that you can solve. So that's where I stand.
The only unsolvable problem is one we don't attempt to solve.
Any response?
No rebuttal.
How do you, Ms. Gonzalez, plan to work across the aisle to achieve meaningful legislation?
Of course, most definitely. So I did work on the PACT Act, which meant I had to work with Republicans and Democrats across the aisle. And it was successful. The PACT Act passed, was signed by President Biden. And regarding the current piece of legislation that I'm working on right now, I am working with Democrats and Republicans to pass this piece of legislation that will be named after my stepdad's mother. So I have shown, and I have a track record of proving that I can work with Republicans and I can work with Democrats. During my last mayor run for office in Texas, I had more Republican votes than I did Democrats. So I do plan on reaching across the aisle. I'm not a very hostile person. I believe in unity. I don't believe in party. And that is why my slogan is Pris for the people, because I am for the people. I do not belong to a party.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. How do you plan to work across the aisle to achieve meaningful legislation?
So compromise is a part of being a leader. It is absolutely needed. However, compromising on our human rights is not a place that we ever need to start with or end with compromise. Shouldn't even be on the table. However, I do think that we need to start seeing each other as people that simply have different ideas about policy rather than who deserves freedom, who deserves life, who deserves rights, and who doesn't. We are not enemies. We are all citizens of the United States. We all want to see our country be successful. We want our people to be able to find success. In order for us, we have to do that, we have to work together. But I do think that we need to understand that there are some things that just never be put on the table, our human rights being that.
Thank you. As we continue to discuss infrastructure as well as public transportation systems in the state of Louisiana, the public community has presented a question that we'll start with Ms. Priscilla on. I'm going to reframe just a little bit to put everything into context. As it relates to forms of transportation, specifically commuter trains, what would your position be in support of or not in support of mass transit industries?
I am in support 100% of mass transit. We have seen that work in other countries. For example, Europe, Japan, so all industrialized countries, and I do not see why we would not have that here in Louisiana, and it would actually improve our job growth, people moving to this state, people being able to have reliable transportation and affordable transportation.
I do support it. I do think that we need to be wise about it. We have, I think one thing that we don't think about or maybe don't realize, one of the things that why we don't have mass transportation right now is because the railways that we see are used for all of the trains, all of them, whether it's shipping, whether it's people, whether they're all on the same track. So, for example, when we have an Amtrak train and a freight train on the same line, the Amtrak train gets precedence, which means our freight has to pull off, they have to stop, they have to wait, that Amtrak train has to go by. So that's part of the problem. So we need to actually invest in the infrastructure of building the tracks that we need, building the things that we need to have this mass transportation in place in the first place.
No.
I have another community question that I'll present. Recognizing, and this is a little bit lengthy, okay? Recognizing the vital role the United States Department of Education plays in ensuring equitable access to quality education across the country, with ongoing debates surrounding the future of the department, how do you plan to advocate for its preservation and improvement to ensure that underserved communities, including those in our district, receive the necessary resources and support to foster educational success and economic growth? Ms. Summerlin.
Well, I would use our history as an example. We have seen this voucher system used before, and it is rooted in racism, and it is specifically created so that access to education is limited to certain people, certain incomes. There is a place in North Carolina that was affected by these voucher programs that were put in place with desegregation. And they were very successful in this county. So successful, in fact, that all public education schools were closed for 5 years. 5 years. An entire county did not have access to public education. That was in the 70s. To this day, the people of that county, the majority of those people are working in food industry. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but unfortunately we know that that does not offer much of a future to have a home, to have a family.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez.
Yes. Every single day, about 5 times a week, I host a live where I advocate against Republicans. I advocate against voting for the Trump administration because if the Trump administration is elected, they are going to abolish the Department of Education, which is Project 2025. So that is where I would begin. I would begin by advocating for people to elect our first female black president, Madame Harris. That is where I would start, and then we would go from there. So as soon as Ms. Harris is elected, and if I am elected as Congresswoman, I pledge to actually stop the vouchers in the state of Louisiana, if it is possible, on a federal and state level, and I actually plan on introducing more legislation. And we've already seen, as Ms. Summerlin stated, how harmful it can be because it only benefits the wealthy and not the minorities.
Thank you. So as it relates to immigration policies, Ms. Gonzalez, what reforms do you support regarding immigration, especially as it pertains to our agricultural economy?
Our agriculture economy. This is going to be a very tough one. I do not advocate for people to migrate to this country because we do exploit them for cheap labor. So I do not advocate for my people or for people from South America to come here until this nation is actually healed and until we start treating our immigrants with respect. Our current congressman spews the words of Hitler and refers to my people as criminals, as rapists, as illegal immigrants. So we degrade them, we dehumanize them, and we cause harm towards those communities. Regarding the Biden administration, they have gotten Mexico to invest $1.5 billion in border security, which has dropped border crossings by 40%. I do support legal immigration, of course. Regarding the mass deportation of 11 million undocumented immigrants would actually crash our economy because they contribute $96.0 billion. And I can go on for hours on this because I'm an expert on immigration. Thank you.
We need to protect those that are already here. We don't need to be spewing dangerous rhetoric full of hate, as we've seen, putting lives in danger. I worked at a Head Start program in Alabama that was specifically created for children of farm working immigrants. And our main purpose was to ensure that these children could go to public school and be ready in the classroom because they do not have the support for the access with language once they go to public school. So that's one of the things that I think that we need to do more of, but we need to expand that and include their parents or their guardians, their adults in their lives. We need to ensure that they're also being able to learn the language so the babies aren't having to carry the burden of being the interpreter. We need to support their parents.
Thank you.
My only rebuttal is that I don't believe that we have to force children to learn English because we do not have an official language. So when it comes to people coming here, I do believe that we also have to work together and we also have to work enseñarnos cómo se platicar en español. So we also need to learn Spanish, French. If you go to Europe, they speak 7 languages. So I don't believe in saying, oh, they have to come here and learn English. That's the only thing I would disagree with.
Learning a language is not meaning to deny your own language. Multilingual people have a lot of success in being able to understand and comprehend the language that's being used in the classroom only increases the student's success for education.
Ms. Summerlin, in closing, you'll have 2 minutes to give your closing remarks. Ms. Gonzalez, following Ms. Summerlin, you'll have 2 minutes to give your closing remarks.
I believe that we deserve better than what we've seen. I believe that we deserve a representative in Congress that isn't spewing hate, that isn't disregarding a huge majority of the constituents. I think that we deserve somebody who is going to put their vote for work for the people. I believe that we deserve somebody who will show up to vote for the people. I believe that we deserve investment, and I believe that we deserve a bright future where all of us have the ability to move up and move forward and find what we want in life to make us happy. We all deserve that.
Are you recusing time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, so like Charles, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I do believe it is my second to third visit here. And I wanted everyone to know that I am here for the veteran. I am here for the homeless person that is living on the street. I am here for the child who is raped by a family member and is forced to carry a fetus to term. I'm here to represent minorities. I'm here to represent immigrants. I am here to represent Latinos. I am here to represent all communities that are actually experiencing a lot of racism, which includes the Jewish community, which includes the Muslim community. I'm here for the working class. I'm here for the blue working collar. I'm here for the veterans. I'm here for the senior citizens. And I promise and I pledge that I will fight every single day that I am in office to focus on every single one of those communities. And as stated before, I do plan, and I have run on this before, dropping the salary to $40,000 per year and investing that in all the parishes, distributing it equally. And I am here for you 24/7. And also, I still have that book. If you want to fill it out and tell me what problem you have in your community, I will get back to you, whether it's text, email, or a letter. Thank you, and I appreciate your time, and take care, and God bless everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Thank you, Ms. Summerlin, for your time, for your dedication to the community, as well as for your progression as women who are focused on a seat in Congress. We are honored to have you here tonight, and we thank you for your sacrifices to be here, as well as your families.
It's a
Thank
pleasure,
you.
not a sacrifice.
Thank you.
Thank you. My family came with me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you hosting this. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming.